Welcome everybody, this is the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform and weekly community call with Microsoft presenters. So this is the call where we have Microsoft product group members, cloud advocates and engineers and product managers and so on, actually showcasing you what they built and how the capabilities are intended to be used from their perspective. Quite often our customers are actually quite clever on using the products and services what we're rolling out, which is why we have another call for community demos, another calls for community demos as well. But Tuesday, 8 a.m. Pacific time is always with Microsoft presenters, with certain exceptions every now and then. Now, we will start with a typical set of recapping some of the slides and assets because we always have new people joining on this call. So we want to make sure that everybody is up to date what's available. Then we will go through the latest news across Microsoft blogs. There's a lot of news actually last week. It's interesting to see how the weeks flip and flop. One of the weeks you'll have 3 new blog posts across all of the Microsoft blogs in Power Platform on Entra ID 65. And then you have 1 week where you have 27 of them or something like that, like this week. But a lot of cool stuff being announced on within the last week as well. And then we'll move into the group picture mode with together mode. So we're using the Teams together mode picture, making sure that we get a nice picture, which will be shared in social media for everybody to benefit as well. So if you're willing at that moment of time, let's enable the camera and do some hand waving there and we get a nice picture of that. And then we move into the real stars of today. We'll have 2 demos of today. Paolo is going to start with patterns for handling user settings in SharePoint Framework. SharePoint Framework is the most widely used extensibility model in Microsoft 365 for UX, especially specifically for UX layer, because that's the SharePoint Framework intended where it's being used across portals and Microsoft Teams and many other areas as well. And then Paolo is going to talk about how to handle user settings within the solutions. So some learnings from the practicalities within last summer. And then the second demo of today is with Sarah and Matthew. I think Sarah's name is missing an H. We'll fix that one in the notes. But Matt are going to talk about OBO flows. OBO means on behalf of flows with Microsoft 365 Agent SDK. And what it means is basically that how do you delegate the user's identity as you move within, for example, calling different services within your code on behalf of user, in this case, calling something inside of the agents. Pretty technical thing, but I think it's really good to get that one covered in the demo as well to actually understand how things are working. I know Sarah and Matt will be joining in pretty soon. We've been chatting on the chat on that. Now, a quick recap on all of the different assets which we have available for you to take advantage. First of all, YouTube channel, all of the recordings of these community calls are getting published there within 24 hours. So you can expect this call to be there within 24 hours from this moment. Quite typically, it's much faster than that, but that gives us some level of a buffer on getting the channel content out. We also published a lot of videos there. It's almost like too much of a videos against all of the YouTube algorithms, but we have so much cool content to share. So we're kind of breaking a bit of the rules, but all of the videos are intended to showcase the awesomeness of Microsoft 365 and Power Platform. So a lot of good goodness and content for you to take benefit as well. Now, we do have our LinkedIn page and group for discussions and updates, good things to follow up as well. There's a lot of open source assets available across Power Platform, M365, and prompts and many other things. But as it might be a bit difficult to find a relevant sample for you, we actually have the sample galleries, and primary one is AKMS community samples. One centralized location to find the relevant sample for you from Microsoft and community. Pretty cool setup. And then there is quite a lot of URLs to remember. Luckily, it is actually only one AKMS community home, or alternative URL for that one is community MS. So if you write community MS in your browser, you will actually land on the community page as well, where you get all of the information and insights on all of the things which are available for you to take advantage for free, which is really cool as well. Now, we do have quite a lot of these community calls. This is Tuesday 8 a.m. Pacific time call with Microsoft speakers. On top of this, we do have 2 different monthly community calls. We have the Power Platform monthly community call that happened last week for this month, and then the Office Add-in monthly community call that happened 2 weeks ago for this September 2025. Power Platform 1 is with community demos. Office Add-ins is primarily with Microsoft provided demos. And then we have our 7 a.m. Thursday series. So every single Tuesday 8 a.m. is with Microsoft presenters, and every single 7 a.m. Thursdays is with community demos. And we're basically looking into combining Microsoft 365 Power Platform community and the SharePoint Framework bi-weekly calls to a single one. So to simplify the message. And that means that within a one call, you could have a capabilities where from Microsoft 365 and Power Platform showcasing the awesomeness, better together story across all of the different things. All of the existing URLs and the call insights, everything else will keep on working. So we will be redirecting automatically all of the URLs for you. We thought about all of this merging potentially happening at some points advanced many months ago. So existing invites will continue working properly, but we will be merging these calls within upcoming weeks from a messaging perspective explicitly. Now you can download recurrent invites at AKMS community calls, and we can always check out the agendas in the meetup service. So if you're kind of wondering, I don't want to join on every single Tuesday or Thursday because I don't know the agenda. No, you will know the agenda. If you go to the meetup service, you can actually subscribe to the agendas immediately when they're available, and you will get an email on the next week's agenda and all of the details within the call. And of course, we'll publish the agenda in social media as well. Now, we do welcome, for a lot of these calls, we do welcome community demos, really important part of this community engagement, you telling how are you using the products. And this doesn't have to be rocket science and doesn't have to be open source. It's about different people showcasing different cases and solutions which are being built, or telling the story on how to get started on some of the out-of-the-box capabilities as well. So definitely welcome capabilities. So think about if you're looking at, for example, getting renewed as an MVP, or if you want to get an MVP, or if you want to just practice your presentation skills, all of you are welcoming to here to present. If you feel like, well, I don't feel that comfortable of presenting, it's all good. We even offer a buddy system, so you can actually get somebody to help you to get actually presented, and you can tag team with somebody within the community to do the presentation. Up to you. How do you want to do that? Great opportunity to practice these things. Now, we do have a lot of assets to get started on Microsoft Cloud at learn.microsoft.com. Great centralized location for all of the free material which is available for you to take advantage. Gajillion modules and learning paths, so you don't have to pay necessarily for any of that content for you to take advantage. Now, we mentioned already the sample gallery. If you go AKMS Community Samples, one centralized location where you can find all of the samples from Microsoft and from the community in a really convenient location. So rather than you being forced to find the relevant GitHub repo across all of the different GitHub repo locations all around the world, we'll have aggregated the information to this one centralized location, which is working really nicely. And it even has a profile page. So if you contributed some of the samples, there's a page for you to share that these are the samples which are contributed, as we can see from the picture with Rabia's profile page on that URL. Now, as you find the sample, you might be wondering on, wait a minute, how do I get started? But before we get there, I just want to remind you on our MCP server. So Paolo is actually already demonstrated this last week within the community call. How can you take advantage of the MCP server for sample gallery? And this is really cool setup. You can use the natural language to get the relevant sample and information about the samples. And you can also test it with GitHub Copilot. You can associate that also, for example, to Copilot Studio if you want to run into demos. So please take advantage of that one in a way you want. Now, coming back on the samples and contribution, and maybe getting started on planning to get started on presenting or contributing, you might feel intimidated on that. We do have our Sharing is Caring initiative, which will help you to get past that boundary and the mental block, or not being afraid of doing these things. And the next sample contribution session is in October 13th. And David, director from LA, is going to talk about what is that contribution session and what is Sharing is Caring.
Yes,
David.
Thank you, Vesa. Yes, absolutely. So what is Sharing is Caring? Well, it is finally scheduled, everybody. We've been talking about that date for a while, but the link is up. Vesa and I flipped that switch this morning, so you can head over to ak.ms/sharingiscaring to get signed up for that October 13th session. And what will you do if you join that session? I'm so glad you asked. It is a session where we walk you through hands-on how to contribute to the community, how to demystify those things like GitHub and those terms like fork and blame and raw and pull request that GitHub hubs, that hub of Gits, that mysterious labyrinth of confusion. We're going to make it simple. It is the gateway to contributing. And it's not just for our community, it's every community. So you're going to pick up some awesome abilities and functionalities that you can apply anywhere. It is absolutely free. It is a safe space. which means that we don't record it. So you're free to ask any and all questions that you would like. Don't worry about it. We're going to learn together. So there's no wrong or bad or horrible question. Every question should be asked. So be on the look, or I should say, go over to ak.ms/sharing is caring, get signed up, get excited. We're going to be there. Hugo's going to be there. I'll be there. And we'll likely have Todd and potentially Stephanie there. They're starting to help out too. And we'll get these things more scheduled on a regular basis. Now, it should also be suggested that these are actual contributions when you join it. And that matters because we've got our community recognition program. So this is powered by Critchley, accredited by Critchley. These are recognized as a best-in-class recognition program by Critchley, which is awesome because we know it's awesome because of all you, but we want you to know that everyone else is recognizing it as an amazing program. And it's not stopping. We're amping it up. In fact, you can see we're still in the middle of superhero season, so you can get that Porcupine Rises badges. We like to have fun with these, but they are real and they are accredited, and they do show that you're making a difference. So you can associate them to your blog. You can add them to your resume. You do get a profile page on Critchley that associates it to all the other ones that you're doing. We see the Agent Academy First Path one is available there. Let's form so many more. And of course, we're just a few weeks away. In fact, I think, my goodness, less than a week now, right? Just about. To Hacktoberfest. So Hacktoberfest, that is branded for their actual branding. It's got that 8-bit kind of throwback feel to it, almost like a Great Scott moment. So you know what? We're not just doing Hacktoberfest. We're actually going to add on a couple of additional badges. Be on the lookout for them. You're going to go back to the community, and you can get a 1.21 gigabit contributor badge. So if you're a fan of Back to the Future, you just wait. We got some awesome stuff in store. It is absolutely free, by the way, to register. We just need you to opt in, ak.ms/community/recognition. We will track the work you're doing, and we will recognize you. And again, thank you all for the amazing contributions you're making to the community. These programs would not be possible without any and all of you. So thank you. Vesa, back to you.
Excellent. Thank you, LA and Helsinki taking over. So quick recap on the events. So TechCon 365, Seattle, Atlanta has already happened. Dallas is happening in November 3rd. That is coming pretty soon. So check out TechCon 365 for more details on that. Now, in October, we also have the Power Platform Community Conference. This is the 4th annual one happening in Las Vegas MGM at October 28th to 13th. And there are some workshop dates as well beforehand and afterwards. Really, really great opportunity of engaging with Microsoft and community members. Now, Ignite following up on that one in November 18th to 21st. This is a hybrid setup, so it is both online and in-person experience. So you can actually, you do not miss out if you're not there in person, but definitely you can be there in person as well. But we want to make sure that everybody feels inclusive across the world, being able to get the latest and greatest on these events as well. Now, ESPC is also happening this year, the 1st to 4th of December 2025. This is the European SharePoint Conference, original name, but it is much more than that nowadays. It's Microsoft 365 AI, security, IT admin, business solutions, modern work, and much, much, much more at www.sharepointeurope.com. And then on spring, we have the European Collaboration Summit happening in Cologne, Germany, at 5th to 7th of May 2026. ECS.events is the more location for more details. On top of these kind of bigger events, there's a massive amount of smaller events, user groups, and other events happening all around the world, from Nigeria to Ghana to United Kingdom to Croatia. So please have a look on communitydays.org. Great opportunities for you to join and being involved as part of the community. The date, August 2025, September 25, should be September to October. It's just to call that out. A small text thing to adjust for me for the next one. Now, we do have a lot of news from Microsoft last week, like mentioned when we started the call. And this time, probably the biggest news, most likely the most visible news, was the updates on the Microsoft 365 Copilot, enabling human agent teams as well, and which is a really, really cool development and more advanced innovation within the Copilot scenarios for sure. Please do check out, and thank you for David for sharing the links in the chat as well. If you're watching the recording, we have the key links also in the description of the video as well. Now, we also have a prompt library. So Copilot prompt library is a way of understanding the value of the Copilot and what it actually provides. And we acknowledge every single week a prompt of the week. And this week, it is actually coming from Jim Duncan. Jim has actually got this one before as well. I do remember a few months back. But this is a great prompt actually adjusting the behavior of the Copilot. So if you tell the Copilot to please slow down, don't answer immediately, ask more insights on my task. It will actually do that. So you are able to ask the Copilot to behave a bit more, not too hectically, and immediately trying to respond to the input. It will ask more details, and then you can provide the details, and then it will actually give you the actual insight it has on your thing. Great example how the Copilot can be adjusted with prompts. Now, and before we go to the actual picture time, just also a reminder, if you are in a Power Platform community conference, we do have a special agent hack happening October 29th, which is a 5-hour hackathon, hands-on hackathon with swag, snacks, and support organized by Microsoft and intended to be more than 2,000 developers building more than 100 agent-driven solutions and a shot at making history. So being the biggest hackathon within the world in a one room. So if you are joining us on the Power Platform conference in October, when you are registering, you are able to indicate your interest on participating on this one at the registration form. And then I guess it's time to go to the Together Mode picture. So if you are willing, you can enable the camera and we will take a screenshot or a Together Mode picture of this one. Let me enable my camera as well. And I will be on the picture, and let me move here. And we do have 50 seats in the room, so we get 50 people max on this beautiful green thing. We are pixel perfect today, which is really, really cool. The fiber is working. I'm not pixel perfect. You're pixel perfect, but I'm not. But let's wait a few more seconds. We get, I said 50 people in the room. Let's wait for people to actually join. I can see David already warming up. And there's other people warming up a bit. Let's wait a few more seconds. We do have some flexibility today before we actually take the picture because we do have 2 demos. And I guess we can start doing the recording. So let me put the recording on. We can still enable the camera. Every now and then you don't unfortunately get there. It depends on how fast it's actually doing that or how Teams is picking up the recording. But let's do some hand waving, everybody. Thank you for being part of the community. Thank you for being part of this call. We really, really truly appreciate you being here and providing us feedback and having a discussion with you. So thank you, everybody, for joining, and please continue doing that in the future. And if there's anything we can help, always let us know. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We will grab a GIF animation out of that and then share it in social media as well. Now let me move you back in this screen. Let me get rid of the funny view and let me disable the camera as well. And then it is time to go to the actual stars of the day. So we'll have 2 demos today. Like mentioned, Paolo is going to start on patterns for handling user settings in SharePoint Framework. Really, really important thing. SharePoint Framework is used by tens of millions of monthly active users. The custom SharePoint Framework components is tens of millions of monthly active users on using them, and the usage is growing rapidly. It's really cool to see that one. And then Sarah and Matthew are going to actually talk about on behalf of flows in Microsoft 365 Agent SDK as the secondary demo. But Paolo, we're pretty much on schedule. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Vesa. I hope you can see my screen.
Yep, I can see the screen. All good. There we go.
Wonderful.
Take it away.
Okay, thank you. So yes, today we are going to talk about how we can handle user settings in SharePoint Framework the right way. I'm Paolo. I'm a senior developer advocate in Microsoft. And now let's move to the actual content of this demo. And let me try to set a bit of context. So why should we care about storing user settings in SharePoint Framework? Well, because every now and then we have web parts or extensions which need to store some information, some options or preferences of our users. And we want to do that in a smart way so that we can have settings stored on a per user basis, relying on the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, if possible, and maybe across multiple devices, and potentially also with the capability to reuse the same settings or options or preferences across multiple web parts, which can be part of the same solution, or across multiple applications within the same solution. Why not? And why would you do that? Well, because you want to have something more than what is available, what is provided out of the box by SharePoint Framework or by the regular web and client-side technologies, like, for example, storing local user settings or stuff like that. For example, if you rely on local user settings, those settings will be just local in the browser session where the user is. If you want to have those settings available across multiple applications, relying on the ecosystem provided by Microsoft 365 will give you a better result, as you will pretty soon see in this demo. Moreover, if you have a custom solution to properly handle user settings in your SharePoint Framework development, you can also be resilient to technology changes. And what I mean is that, for example, if something will change in the way we can store information on the client side or through SharePoint Framework, well, using your own infrastructure, your own solution built the right way, you can be independent from those technology changes. And as I said, you can also have a solution which is much more enterprise ready and ready to support multiple devices and components. And last but not least, security is always fundamental. The solution I'm going to show you now is a solution which is really secure and allows every single user to have her or his own settings without any risk of having settings or information of a user available to any other user in the system. So let's move to the proposed solution, which is based on a SharePoint Framework web part, which relies on a back-end REST API service, which has been built using an Azure function, creating an Azure function, secured with Entra ID and open authorization. So when it comes to security, we rely on the best options we have in the fields of SharePoint Framework custom development, so Entra ID and open authorization. We also rely in this solution on the Microsoft Graph to get access to a special folder that every user does have for every application registered in Entra ID, and I will show you what I mean with special folder. And then we store the settings in this scenario, in this sample, as a JSON file in that special folder. But you can do actually whatever you want. Can be one file, can be multiple files, can be whatever you need to store in order to keep track of the user preferences. And what is really important is that we rely on the OneDrive for Business service instance for every single user, so that, as I said before, we can have a dedicated storage for these settings and preferences on a per user basis. And all of that thanks to Entra ID. So let me briefly show you a solution diagram to let you better understand what I'm talking about. And then I will switch to the actual demo environment and show you how it works and how I built it. So let's imagine that we have a user, and the user is willing to interact with the SharePoint Framework web part, or generally speaking, also with a more generic Microsoft 365 solution, and makes a request through a browser to get access to a SharePoint Framework web part. Well, in this solution, first of all, through the SharePoint Framework out-of-the-box capabilities, we rely on Entra ID to request an access token for the current user to consume an external API that we host as an Azure function. Then we invoke the API providing the access token. The API itself, so I mean the Azure function, will still rely on Entra ID to get what is called a NOBO on behalf of token, so that by requesting and getting back a NOBO token from Entra ID, the Azure function REST API will be able to consume Microsoft Graph on behalf of the user who is consuming the SharePoint Framework web part in the front end. And by doing that, through Microsoft Graph, the Azure function will get access to one or more files stored in this special folder that I'm talking about, and will be able to retrieve the content of the file and make it available to the Azure function, so that the Azure function will be able to provide the settings and the information to the SharePoint Framework web part, which will be able to render the content personalized based on the preferences of the user. So that's the big picture of the solution I'm going to show you and to share with you right now. So now let's switch to the actual demo, and let's see how it has been implemented and how it works. So let me switch to my browser. And first of all, this is the page where you can find additional information about the sample solution that I'm sharing with you now. And it's available on the sample gallery. And you can find it also on GitHub. There is a GitHub repository, which is the SPFx web part, where you can find this web part, including a nice looking, or supposed to be nice looking, README file, and also with a technical overview of the solution itself, thanks to GitHub Copilot indeed. So this is the sample solution that you are going to see. And now let's see the solution in action. First of all, I said we rely on a special folder, where a special folder is nothing more than something that you can get through a Microsoft Graph, so that you can make a graph request for this specific endpoint, /me, /drive, /special, and the name of the special folder you're looking for. Notice that here we have /me. So it is an endpoint on a per user basis. So every single user will get a different endpoint for a specific special folder. Now, when it comes to requesting a special folder, here is the list of special folder that you can request, including this one, the uproot one. So if you make a request for /me, /drive, /special, /uproot, what will happen will be that Microsoft Graph will give you back an endpoint to access the information to access still through Microsoft Graph, a folder in the OneDrive for Business of the current user, because of this me, and this special folder will be actually a folder under the apps subfolder in the OneDrive for Business of the user, which is connected to the application, Entra ID application, that you are going to use to make a request for that specific approval. Meaning that every single and every different application registered in Entra ID will have a different application route for every single user in the OneDrive of the user. Okay, so that's why you can have a fully isolated set of settings on a per app and per user basis. Now, let me first of all show you the web part in action, and then we will dig into the actual functionality under the cover. This is the web part. Clearly, it is a web part just to let you take inspiration from this pattern. So I'm not willing to show you a really nice looking web part. This is just based on the out-of-the-box layout of the pre-scaffolded web parts in SharePoint Framework. But I have this section where I can create personal settings made of a key and of a value. So, for example, my setting that I want to add could be community rocks. Okay? So, by adding this setting in my personal settings, I will be able to store this information in the personal folder of the uproot of this application, and I will get back a list. Of course, the process was sleeping and now it is running. You can see here I have my new key and my new value available. I can even edit it and remove any setting if I want to get rid of it. What happens under the cover is that in the OneDrive for Business of my user, in the apps folder, in the application folder dedicated to the application that I'm using right now, and that I'm going to show you soon, I have a JSON file where I'm storing all of the settings, including the key 1, key 2, my settings with community rocks. So this is just an idea. And as I said, here you can store all of the settings in a single file, or if you need, or if you like, you can even store multiple files, which will be related only to this specific application and to this specific user. In order to being able to do that, I need, first of all, to have an application registered in Entra ID, which is what I have. As you can see right here, this is my application, React Settings Approved. And as you can notice, the name, the display name of this application is precisely the name of the folder that I've got and that I have in the OneDrive for Business of my user. This application, if we look into the settings, is configured from an API permission point of view to consume Microsoft Graph with the files.readwrite.app folder delegated permission. Why? Because that's the permission we need as per the documentation that we have in Microsoft Graph. Then we also expose an API with this application, and this will be the API that we are going to consume from the SharePoint Framework web part. So we have a permission scope which is called user-settings.manage, and this permission scope is the one that SharePoint Framework relies on to get the access token to consume my custom API. Plus, in the certificate and secret, I've configured the client secret so that I can use it in order to retrieve the on behalf of token for my user. Then I have the SharePoint Framework solution itself. So let me show you that one. Here is the solution that you can find on GitHub, as I said, and that's divided into two main sections, the backend and the front end. In the backend, we have the Azure function, which is a TypeScript Azure function, while in the front end, we have the SharePoint Framework web part. And let's start from that one. In the SharePoint Framework web part, this is a really simple and regular web part, as I said before, but in the render method of my web part, using the out-of-the-box capabilities of SharePoint Framework, I use the AAD HTTP client factory of the context to get a client, an HTTP client, to consume the unique URI of an application. What is this application? Well, clearly is the application that I just showed you in Entra ID. And in fact, if we go to expose an API, that application does have a unique URI, and this will be the value that I need to provide as a settings for my web part to get an HTTP client. Then I provide the HTTP client to the React component that I use for rendering the UI of my web part. And in there, I have a functional component that I decided to use to render my web part. And in there, I simply rely on my API so I can make the fetch of a specific item, and I can make a post to add a new setting, I can make a put to update a new setting, I can delete the settings, and of course I can create a new one if I want to create a new setting. So simply by relying on the HTTP client created by SPFx based on the application unique URI of my app registered in Entra ID, I can then target my API which will be available at a specific URL. And that's why, if I switch briefly back to this page, I can show you that in edit mode, we can configure this web part to have a specific application unique URI, which is precisely the one I showed you before, and the URL. And right now, the URL of the endpoint of my API is running locally on my local machine just for the sake of showing you the API in action. And this is the URL I can use to consume my API. So basically, here in SharePoint Framework, I'm reaching out to the API, which is running locally, and then I'm managing the setting keys. When I do that, I rely on the fact that in SharePoint Framework, I can declare that I want to have a set of Web API permission requests. And specifically, I have a Web API permission request for my backend app registered in Entra ID and looking for the specific permission scope. And through this setting in the package solution JSON file of my solution, I have that again in Entra ID for my SharePoint Online client extensibility, which is the first-party application provided by Microsoft to securely access backend APIs in SharePoint Framework. I can look into the security permissions, and I can see that here somewhere I will have, most likely at the end, and here we are, I have a permission for the React setting uproot to use the permission scope user settings.manage. So this is to give you the full round trip of the open authorization flow that is happening under the cover. So now we have the function, the Azure function, and in the Azure function, we have a set of plumbing code to validate the access token that we get. So the OBO token that we get from the Azure, from the SharePoint Framework consumer. And we do the validation of the token. And once we have got the proper token, we can process all of the requests of the user through this endpoint user settings, which will go through the request method. And if it is a request to create a new setting, it will make a post. If it will be a request to update one, it will be a put. If it will be a request to delete, it will be a delete one. And before relying on the actual request of the user, we validate the token. We get the OBO token so that we can interact with Graph on behalf of the user. Then we get the uproot, which means that, as I was showing you before, we make a request to Graph to get the special folder uproot, which will become the root that I have in OneDrive for Business for my specific application, just because I'm providing the access token issued to my application, and based on the fact that it is issued for my application, Microsoft Graph will give me back the right uproot folder for my current application. And once I've done with that, you go back here, I get the uproot, I can read the setting files, and again, to read the setting file, I can simply use Microsoft Graph, and I can access the drive item, and I can get the content of that drive item. Once I have the settings, I can simply play with the settings. So I can read all of them, I can add a new item, I can update, or I can delete an item. Simple as that. And then we expose as an Azure function REST API the user setting endpoint with all of these HTTP methods. So, as I said, feel free to download the source code of the solution so that you can run through it and have a better understanding of how it works. But this is a really solid and secure pattern to handle security on a per user and per app basis. And if you will share the same app behind the scenes of multiple applications or web paths, you can have preferences and settings shared across multiple web paths for the same user. Here you have some useful links, which I also provided in the chat. And I think that's all for me. So thank you, and back to you, Vesa.
Excellent. Thank you, Paolo. And that one, really, really cool setup and super important setup to actually understand as well. So having that information securely stored is really, really important. But again, you can move the same application, multiple devices, it will have access on the same information, which is really, really cool. Now, thank you, Paolo, on that one. Let's then transition to Sarah and Matthew, who are going to talk about the OBO flows with Microsoft 365 Agent SDK. And I think Sarah is going to start screen sharing, I'm guessing. Yes, I am. And then we'll transition to Matt. But Sarah, I can see the screen.
Thank you so much. Hey, everyone. I hope you're doing well. That was a really good 30 minutes. So let's transition to the Agents SDK. So I'm going to provide the frame, just like we did a few weeks ago. So and just to remind you all what the Agents SDK is, it is an open source SDK made by Microsoft. It's available in 3 languages, GA in all 3 languages, C#, Python, and JavaScript. And this SDK allows you to bring any AI and orchestrator to your agent. It allows you to build an agent. And essentially, you can kind of see here that it essentially wraps your agent with those components that you choose to bring. So you bring semantic kernel as an orchestrator, for example. You can bring Azure, you can bring OpenAI, really whatever you want. And then you can go connect that to our 1P clients like Microsoft Teams, M365 Copilot, or you can bring your own client as well. We have many customers with their own custom apps that want to go and bring their own agent to it. And really, you might be wondering, well, Sarah, then if you are not bringing the AI and orchestrator, well, what do you bring? We bring a lot of different components. And the channel adapter piece is the one that I just covered, which is really that flexibility to build once and deploy in many different areas, as well as managing the specific client behaviors. Essentially, Teams, M365 Copilot, custom web apps, websites, etc. They all act a little bit different. They all support different things. And so you're going to need to be able to manage those. We also want to be able to provide depth around client extensibility. What we'll probably do is we'll probably do another session on the client extensibility piece, because we want to allow you to start with the Agents SDK, have that breadth, but then also unlock some of the depth, the client depth that you're going to need. An example of this is like the Teams SDK, for example, like the AI library. You're going to want to start with the Agents SDK, but then go ahead and use specific client functionality, which of course is not in the Agents SDK, it's going to be in the client SDK. And this is going to be the same for other clients, of course. So we'll probably do a double click on that at some point to explain how that works together. We also have a bunch of Copilot Studio extensibility, but what we want to talk to you about today is the auth part. We actually want to go through, which is always fun and exciting and not complicated at all. And Matt's really going to go through OBO flows. He's going to make it super simple, super easy, and show you how it's done. So over to you, Matt.
So what we're going to talk about today is OBO. So OBO, which is on behalf of authentication. I would probably say that most of our agents today operate in what we talk about as an on behalf of scenario. That may change in the future, but most of them need to act as the calling user. So we were talking about Copilot Studio, and what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to have an agent communicate with Copilot Studio as the user at whatever viewpoint. This is taking advantage of both the features in the Agent SDK focused around the S2S feature set, as well as the token exchange feature set, as well as the Copilot Studio client, which is part of the Agent SDK. And if we have time towards the end, we'll show you the same thing using the same technique using AI Foundry, as it works pretty much the same way back and forth. The first demo I'm going to show you as I zoom in and start working on this is going to be focused on a sample that is publicly available. You guys can go pull this and do exactly what I'm doing right now. It's available up on the Agent SDK. It's not using one of Matt's tweaked demos. This one is actually up on our GitHub site right now. So we're going to start with an agent. We have an agent here in Copilot Studio. This is one of our brain dead templates. It's just something that does basic weather through MSN Weather. Now, within this capability, we have this concept called channels. And within channels, we have a thing called native app or web app. We walk into native app, you'll see that there's this connection string here. Okay. This used to be a direct line connection string, and in some cases, you'll actually see direct line connection stuff depending on what it is you're connecting to. This connection string is for the Copilot Studio client, which is why it's tagged as an Agent SDK connection string. Now, where does this go? So what we're going to do is we're going to open up, in this case, we're going to open up over here the samples solution from the agents repo. This is out. If you go to github.com, whack Microsoft, whack agents, there'll be a samples folder. And in the samples folder, there's a .NET folder. And in the .NET folder, you will find a solution that opens up all of these samples. One of those samples is called OBO authentication, on behalf of authentication. And inside there, there's an app settings. Now, within that app settings, there's a section called Copilot Studio Agent. To use that connection URL, you put in a key called direct connect URL and drop that link in. Okay, and actually we don't need this key. Sorry, forgot I had left that in there. In this particular sample, all you need is the direct connect URL. Now we have environment ID and schema name. And in that scenario, the environment ID and schema name are used to construct this locally. Those two values, going back over to Copilot Studio, actually are in Copilot Studio as well. You can piece it together from here, or you can go into the settings, advanced, metadata, and there's your environment ID, and there's your schema name. Okay, those are the two pieces of data that you would need to populate those two keys if you wanted to. We provide two ways to do it. You can use the environment name or schema name or the direct connect URL. Why do we provide two ways to do it? In a lot of our use cases and a lot of our scenarios, we're finding that folks are building agents that need to be able to connect to multiple Copilot Studio agents, and you don't necessarily know what that data is at development time. So you don't have all the connection information. So you can generate it and populate it in. Now, as part of the basic setup of an agent, we have to establish its service connection. The service connection is how it's communicating back to, in this case, the calling service. You're going to see me demonstrate this through 3 different clients today. That client, the particular scope that we're using changes based on the client. The Agent SDK takes care of that. In this case, this is just defining that we're mapping all service URLs to use this service connection. And again, maybe we'll do a deep dive on this at some point in the future. We can actually support multiple connections. We can actually be talking to Copilot Studio using one connection, be talking to Teams using a different connection, be talking to something else using a different connection. And that can be controlled by the service URL or the audience of the incoming request, associating it back to a connection. But for our basic purposes, this is the boilerplate mechanic. Here you're seeing me use client secret. Client secret is not required. It could be managed identity. It could be a bunch of other things. Really depends on your needs. But for my purposes, I'm using client secret because I'm running local dev. Now, let's scroll up here to the top. This is where some of the magic happens, this agent application capability. This is a configuration-centric way to control the agent application experience within the development service. So an agent application can be configured to automatically sign in or it could sign in on demand, on need, based on a handler configuration. We support an array of handlers. So in this case, I've got one that I'm just calling MCS, but let's say I've got the need to, in some cases, I'm working with GitHub or Facebook, and in other cases, I'm working with Teams, and in other cases, I'm working with some other scoped capability. So either I can define for anything that's Entra-based, one handler that provides an exchangeable token, or I can provide a handler per scope set and process it that way. For our purposes here, we're providing an exchangeable token handler, and I'll show you how that's configured here in just a minute. Okay. We have an optional capability to associate it to the connection that is used to exchange it. So once again, this is a configuration-centric way to deal with, hey, I need to be able to exchange the SSO01 connection for something else. What service principal locally do I use to do that exchange? Okay, we don't push it off the box to do an exchange. We actually do the exchange locally. Up here at the top, this is part of our token validation logic that's built in. I use built in as a loose term. We actually provide a file in all of our samples called ASP.NET extensions. This is for you to build your own token validation logic. This is something that's actually really different than the way we did it in Bot Framework. In Bot Framework, we kind of built all that behind the scenes. This area changes too fast. At this point, we push the whole validation layer up into your space. And this way you can see what's going on and make changes and apply your own appropriate validation wherever without having to worry about us doing something behind your back. Okay, so that's the setup of the app config file. Let's walk into the program. Now, you're going to notice that this particular sample really only has one executing file program. This is one of those all-in-one projects, meaning we did the whole project inside one C# file. That's an answer to, yeah, this is fairly easy to put together, but it also does create a little bit of confusion and clutter when we look at the file. So I'll try to explain what's going on as you're looking through here. So as we work down from the top, we're setting up our basic console client with an HTTP endpoint. We are ingesting the application options that we just talked about. We're adding a memory storage system. This is one of our default mechanics where we add memory storage into the system. Some people have asked me in the past, why don't we make this automatic? Why do we have to put this in your face? Why do you have to see this? The answer is this is here to try to keep you guys out of mistakes, because if you deploy this agent horizontally, multiple instances, and you're using memory storage, each agent is on its own. It doesn't see any other agent. So if you switch that to blob storage or you switch that to Cosmos storage, and they all point at the same access key, then all the agents can see each other's state, and then a load balancing request can actually pick up things as we go along. Now, coming down into the builder, here we're adding the agent. Now, in this case, since we did this all in one, we actually added the agent, instantiated the agent, set up the Copilot Studio client inline, and wired up all the messages handlers, but also put the implementation of the message handlers straight into the on agent implementation. So for those of you that enjoy, having it all in one file and not having to run around to look in various places, this sample is for you. So here in our on activity, what we're saying is that for any activity that comes into the system, we check to see if we have a previous conversation ID, i.e. we've been talking to an MCS agent. If not, we go get our Copilot Studio client, which we defined right here. Okay. And then if we do not have a conversation ID, we initiate the conversation ID and start the conversation. We send the initial activity and send the response back. If we do have the conversation ID, we go into the conversation loop where we're now communicating with the Copilot Studio agent and watching the traffic come back and feeding that traffic back out to the caller. Now, in this case, you're seeing we're just passing the text back. We can pass the whole activity back if the upstream system can handle that. If the upstream system can't handle that, of course, you need to either pare the activity down to what it can deal with or just send text. Now, this last little piece here, this auto sign-in handler, MCS, what that is telling the system is that when the onActivity method is invoked, this handler is picked. That means that the system must resolve the MCS authentication handler before it invokes your code. Those of you that have been with us through Bot Framework also know that in the past, we used to have you stand up a dialog and run through this dialog authentication process that you had to deal with managing the state through potentially a horizontally scaled deployment. We've taken that out, and at the end of the day, this is all wrapped behind this auth mechanic now. We manage that sequencing and that flow. This correlates back over here to our app settings to this. This is the actual handler entry that's being referenced. So in order to invoke that implementation, the Azure Bot SSO1 authentication handler must be resolved before we go in. Okay. Now, where do we get the user token? I've talked a lot about that, about how we're navigating around. But where does the user token come from? If we come back here to the Copilot Studio client, the Copilot Studio client exposes a token provider function. This is where you go get the access token. It's one of the ways that we do that. And in this case, we have a method here that is called return user authorization exchange token async. We're passing in the handler and the scopes we want. So for this particular agent, what scope do we need? In the case of the Copilot Studio client, we have the ability to automatically generate scopes based on the settings that are passed into it. Okay. And that in turn tells us what scope that we need. So I'm going to go ahead and put a breakpoint right here. I'm going to start this client up. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do this through, let's start with Teams. Okay. And I'm going to say, hi there. Now, as you can see, I received my traffic. Traffic will come in and my breakpoint will stop here. So at this point, I am, if I were to say grab that, and I were to do a quick watch on this, and I were to do a get turn token async for context, and that's it, get result. Okay, so I just in chat, just sitting here and invoked the get token command, which Teams SSO'd me in, and I can see that I have got a token with an audience of the exchanger, which in this case is the API endpoint, and it's for me. Oops, sorry, it's for me, and it has the default scope, which I'd configured. Okay, but this isn't what I need. What I actually need is this scope, Power Platform default scope. Okay, so we walk through this exchanger. We're going to go ahead and just highlight all of that and quick watch that. And dot result. Oh, sorry, I can't do that. I'm in the middle of an invocation. Let's step over it. There we go. And there's the result we got back. Let's look at our token. And I've now exchanged that token for api.powerplatform.com. And I've got my name again. And I also have for my scope, SCP, my Copilot Studio invoke scope. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit continue and run on. So Copilot Studio is now doing its thing. And there is the response that we got from Copilot Studio, which in this case, again, popping back to our Copilot Studio experience. Close that. And it is the same text.
Sorry to interrupt, Matt. Can you just zoom into MCS?
There we go. It is the same text that you see here and that you see here. Okay. And again, this is essentially taking advantage of the OBO feature set from Teams. You never, any point, saw me plug my account in. Okay. Now, if I come into Copilot, it also works here. Again, we operate the same mechanical way. Hi there. And again, we'll roll through. You'll see my breakpoint trip out here in just a second. Boom, there's my breakpoint tripping. and we run through, and we'll continue. Let me actually remove that breakpoint, just click continue. We'll continue on. And here in my Copilot Studio client, as you can see, I keyed it twice. It ran through and ran the request twice and gave me this. At this point, I could say, it's the weather in Seattle. Okay, it's going to be nice. And you can see over here on the right side, there's a bunch of communication. So now it's asking for clarification. So now this is unrelated to this particular particular flow. But as you can see here, since I was only sending the text back, the suggested actions didn't come. Okay, so let me go fix that. I know this is a little vectored, it's a little unrelated, but since we're talking here, I'm just going to do that. I'm going to remove the text, restart my app, and then we're going to pop back over here. Then I'm going to say hi there again. Let the system run all the way through. And again, we went through and we communicate. There's my response. And it should process. There's our request. Oh, didn't like something there. Yeah, so it doesn't like the suggested actions on that experience, but let's do here. This is kind of some deviations between BizChat and oops, that's definitely not a right name. Let's see what it says to that. Invalid activity ID. So it doesn't like, Teams doesn't like the response that I'm sending back. We need to do some parsing on that message to get it back there. Anyway, that generally gives you the flow back. Suggested actions do work when we do send them back. They just have to be in the right format for some processing. So that is OBO talking to Copilot Studio. Let's change gears and let's go talk to AI Foundry. So this demo is also up on GitHub. It's not on our GitHub. This one is on David's GitHub, which we can link to you guys. We helped him build this. And it is organized very much the same way. It's just a little bit cleaner, at least from my point of view, in that what we have done here is we have tightened up the request here. We just have our, we're using semantic kernel because in this case, we're communicating with AI Foundry. We add our agent application. We add our agent. So in this case, we're just adding in the agent. We add our memory storage in. There it goes. The rest of it is put together pretty much the same way. If we go to app settings, we can see in this case, we've got two, one with AI Foundry and one with SSO Foundry. Our connections are set up the same, but you also see we have two connections here where we exchange the SSO Foundry for a different, we're using a different app ID to the exchange for that one. The actual Azure agent is set up very much the same way, where we're picking up the connection information to talk to Azure. We deal with our conversation started. None of these actually require authentication. That was actually something else. Let me point that out to you. Auto sign in on this is false. So it will not automatically sign you in this scenario. It'll only sign you in if the handler asks for it, and the handler is only going to ask for it on a message activity. Okay, so we're just going to run through this, and we will come back over here. And again, I'm not going to change my bot. I'm going to say hi there. And again, you see the system operating in the background. And now we're using streaming. So we have some streaming information coming back. It's going to ask me how it can assist me. I'm going to say, what was closing price, NSFT. So I kind of gave it an out of context request. I didn't tell it what day I was interested in. It just sort of figured it out, or it will just sort of figure it out based on context. So it's going to tell me, oh, on 9/22, which was yesterday, it closed out at 5/14. Okay. And it gave me a little source. I could say, what about over the last 5 days? And again, you're going to see the interaction give me back the closing price over the last couple of days. Now, again, we can keep, we not only can keep user authorization or organize it this way for user authorization, we can also keep context separate, which means that if Sarah were to log in to this experience right now and start typing, we would use her account and not my account. Okay. We also keep the conversations specific between different callers. So this is the stock price of Apple. So again, now I'm asking it a different question on a different channel, and the interaction is flowing back and forth. We'll give it just a moment here. It's flagging stock traders down. There he goes. And there's our interaction there. And I could say, what was the stock price? What about the last, let's see, what about last 3 days? Not 5, last 3. So now again, we're keeping the authentication and the identity separate. So how do we do that? Okay. Just like with the Copilot Studio client, if we pop back over here to our code, you will see that when we do an invocation down here, we're creating a persistent agent. And in the case of working with the persistent agent client, we need to use a token in the format of an Azure token, not a standard JWT token. So we have a little wrapper class that we pass to the user authorization handler, which is this class right here, which just returns a token credential. And in this case, it's receiving a get token request from the persistent agent client. And we need to transition that scope to a correct scope, user impersonation, because it's asking for the default scope. And we do the same exchange you saw me do on the Copilot Studio client, where we are now exchanging it, in this case, for the handler that's coming in. So if I drop my breakpoint right here, and I go back over to my client, and I ask again, out over the last 5 days. And in a moment, you'll see us hit this breakpoint. So here, the scope we're asking for now is the user impersonation AI scope. We are using the AI Foundry handler to make the exchange request, and then the token that comes back is in turn handed back to AI Foundry, where AI Foundry does its deal and provides us the information. Now, just the last thing to prove that we're actually keeping context and everything straight. What did I last ask you? Most agents can do this, by the way. As you can see, it even parroted back my terrible spelling. And in this case, it said, oh, well, in this channel, you were talking to me about Microsoft. And if I come back over here and I say, what did I ask you here? And here, you'll see it's going to say that, oh, you were just talking to me about Apple. Okay, so again, we're keeping things straight. And again, we do this with the identity. So how does this actually look going upstream? So let's go ahead and stop this. And let's go look at the actual Azure configuration that we use to do this. Okay, so what did we do to do this deployment? So first, we have our Azure bot servers. And as you can see, I was testing here. If I go into my configuration for my Azure bot, and notice I was using the same Azure bot as I was flipping back and forth between things. The reason I'm able to use the same Azure bot is that I have a single bot registration that I have published publicly into Office. And I am simply reporting the messaging endpoint. And as long as my clients can speak to this app, can handle traffic from that app identity, that service principal, I can communicate with this agent. So I can separate the needs of my front ends, which in this case are my Office front ends or my web chat front ends, from my actual implementation and reuse the same deployment as needed to test various scenarios. The only time I actually ever really need to do another deployment to push something back out is in the scenario where I need to change the startup prompts, or I need to change the cards, or I need to change the iconography or the look and feel of the button as it represents. Okay. So if I come down here and I take a look at our SSO01, which is the one we were using, I can see that I've registered this out as an Active Directory v2. I've given it a client and a secret. Now, and the exchanger, that's the key. The exchanger is one of the key elements that has to be there. We have documentation that goes through the setup on the other side. So if I come over here and take a look at that actual application, you can see that I've got my API key, I've got my default scope, and I have the applications that are allowed to exchange for me. Okay, so again, a lot of feature set, a lot of capability around this. This is where some of the complication rises up in making this configuration work. And then in Teams itself, tying that into Teams, into the Office presentation so that Teams can properly exchange this token. We're going to try to do some short videos focused in on just doing that. The agent toolkit does a pretty good job in doing deployments correctly, so that it sets this stuff up for you. That when you do run into a problem, it typically is something that you have to dig at to understand. So I think we're going to end up doing a couple of short videos to kind of take the whole system apart, not the code, but the configuration apart, to try to give you guys more of a step-by-step of how it's actually put together, and how Microsoft is doing this token exchange so that when you come to troubleshooting it for your customer, you can figure out how to do this without going, it's a black box, I don't know. Because there are some pieces that are a little bit of a black box. So with that, I'm going to stop it there and open the floor for any questions or any comments in chat. I know I ran over again. I'm sorry. I tend to do that.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah and Matt, on that one. Let's follow up on the questions in the chat because we need to free the people on their day-to-day things as well and other meetings and all of that. But thank you. Really, really cool setup. Thank you, Paolo. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Matt. Really, really, really cool demos and showcasing the details and in and outs on how things are working. Super valuable because that's the thing what we need to know when we're implementing this in the real world. Now, let's move on the agenda and talk a bit about next week, if I can get the slides to move, and I can't. That is interesting. So let me actually do it here. And I can't, so let me actually do it in here. Let me do that, and then we'll be fine. So we're going to close up for today. So thank you again, Paolo, Sarah, and Matt on that one. Next week, we're going to talk about, on 13th of September, we're going to talk about SharePoint agents and the most simplistic agents, which you can create with within the Copilot with the click of a button. And they are actually surprisingly powerful. So we're going to walk through what they are, how they actually work, and then what are the limits of the SharePoint agents as well. Then Judith is going to talk about the knowledge agent, which is something what was actually rolling out last week and announced across the SharePoint and actually impacting many other areas as well. And Paolo is also back on the SharePoint framework settings things. So a lot of SharePoint features, SharePoint related features next week, just by a coincidence, just balancing out things as well. In the meanwhile, we do have the Discord server where we are closing into 3,000 members. So if you're interested on engaging there, that is available at AKMS Community Discord. We're always looking for feedback on all of these calls, and I do apologize that we went a bit long today on this call, but we're trying to keep the schedule always intact. But the recording will be available within 24 YouTube channel, typically in 18 hours or so, and follow up with us on LinkedIn and so on to get notified when the video is available. Next call, September 13th. But thank you everybody for joining. Really, really cool demos today. Thank you, Sarah, Matt, and Paolo on those, and we'll be back again next week. Cheers, everybody. Bye-bye.